train from Bridgend, it goes to Barry, and then Dinas Powys, Penarth.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there is a train, which, okay. Did you get that message?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, there she is.
hello. Hello.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi, how are you today?
Oh, we're all right.
Hanging in there.
Good, good. I can't wait to see you both as well tomorrow, Pat and Anne as well. And nice to see you again, Richard. Today we're going to be looking at Wexford, most specifically ferns. It's something that I've been focusing on for my dissertation, so I thought I might focus on the area and might give you a bit of a hint of where I'm going in terms of my dissertation. But in terms of the dissertation, I want to do a nice presentation for that once I've got everything started. I'm just trying to fit the little missing pieces of the puzzle, which it's been up and down roller coaster at the moment. I had a meeting this morning and it went fine, and yeah, so I can't wait to show that to you. But first I want to talk about the news. I know Canterbury Cathedral has had their stained glass windows dated to be 900 years old, which is the oldest in Britain, which is amazing. And I read that I've forgotten, I'll find it now. But Anne, have you got any news?
I've forgotten it. I've forgotten what news I had. I haven't at the moment, no.
No, that's fine. Anne?
Except we're going to have a new person maybe come tomorrow.
Yes, Carl's mentioned, which would be
okay.
great. And I overheard as I was just collecting things together for today, that you said that he might be, you'd be joining Cardiff University, which is great as well. To
yeah, I mean, personally, I think it would be really good for him to be able to come to our class and meet you, and you know, well, I say meet you as someone who's been through Cardiff, and you know, it sounds like he wants some preparation before he goes to Cardiff, and he wants to try and do a dig.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's really cool. I know Cardiff Uni have started their digs again. I follow a page. I can't remember what they're called. And they've started having a dig on the border of Wales and England, which sounds amazing. Some sort of fort, but they haven't released anything yet. But yeah, I could give him some tips and some nice places to go in Cardiff.
Well, I've paid his £10, right? So he has been. If he doesn't come, then that's fine. You know, I can't chase him up because I haven't got any information. I just got his name, and I know I've met him. So you know, but I just thought I don't really have to tell you, but I got an appointment tomorrow afternoon as well. But I think I should probably come along to the class.
Yeah.
That's my news, really.
No, that's fine, Anna. We'll have a relaxed one. In terms of the person who wants to join, I think it's a good idea, because that was why I joined the classes a year ago, was to start preparing myself for my masters, and it does help. And yeah, it's a good idea. I've just remembered what other news I wanted to mention, which is great for Wales, is UNESCO's officially designates Wales's slate areas as a World Heritage Site as well. So a lot of people have been really happy about that. I know Stonehenge is at risk at the moment.
Yeah,
it's a shame. Yeah, it's all the developments, and I don't think I know a lot of younger people, which I've noticed, have taken a lot of interest in protecting the archaeology and history in Britain now. So it's made me happy to see that, rather than seeing people saying, "Oh, it's the past, I don't care." And it's nice to see a change in perception. So more people are doing petitions, but with the sort of people that's in charge, I don't know whether they would look at the petition and debate it, or just let it fly over their heads. So fingers crossed in terms of that, really. Pat, have you got any news?
No, no, sorry.
No, that's fine. Richard?
No, not really. No,
No, that's
nothing
fine.
to think of.
Peter?
No real news. I've had some sad news today, but that's family news. I may have to drop out. If I do drop out, it's nothing to do with you or the lecturers. That I've had an important phone call, which I've had to
That's a bereavement.
take. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Peter. My thoughts are with you and your family as well.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, it's all right. Well, I got stuck into it today. Like I said, it's something that I'm focusing on in terms of my dissertation. I've been looking at Ireland and places like Tintagel and Bristol, but today I thought I'll have a look at Wexford, especially ferns, and just have a look at the little aspects of what's going on there and the reason why I find it significant as well for my dissertation. I've been reading a lot about pottery, etc. as well that's been found there. So I have really been going crazy in terms of this. And hopefully I can sort of show you where I'm heading with it as well. If my laptop wants to work. Oh, crikey. It's working now.
Oh, I'm just going to get a book.
No, that's all right, Anne. So like I said, Ferns, Wexford. The books that I've used as well today, this is going to be a little bit academic heavy, but I've put it in my own words, so you'll be fine. I'm not flowery with my language sometimes, but I have focused on, it's a book that I keep mentioning quite a lot, is Land of My Fathers by Gwynfor Evans. He's got a lot of information, especially things I didn't even know about in terms of documentary evidence and even archaeological evidence. So that's something that I've focused on. And he's looked at the relationship between Ireland and Wales as well. And so I've brought Wales into this as well, even though we're in Ireland, because the whole connection with Wales and England with Ireland is what is my focus. And I think Wexford is a very interesting area because you'll see in here, this is a power centre. You're seeing a lot of trade and religion and politics going on here. Lots of different types of artefacts. We'll be looking at tapestries, even poems. One poem that I'm going to talk about in terms of trade. We'll be looking at architecture. There's amazing architecture here. And it's brought a lot of light bulb moments as I've been going along. And it's something that I thought would be nice to do with you guys because it also hits two birds with one stone and really cements what I'm thinking in terms of Wexford for my dissertation. And I think it has, beautiful, like I said, beautiful architecture here, and I think it highlights the importance of Ireland in medieval Britain and Europe as well. There's a lot of trade and migration going on here. Ireland's interacting with lots of people, seeing a lot of conquests, raids, trade, and I think it shows to me how significant this area is as well. And Wexford didn't really come along into the picture until the later Viking period because their trade was mostly from Dublin to Chester, and then as time went on it was Dublin to Wexford, to Swansea and some other places in South Wales, and then to Bristol. And one thing that's been stumping me really in terms of Ireland and Wales was, where are the kilns? Why aren't there kilns? And I realised they were more focused on their agriculture, on their livestock, and I think identity is strong in Wales and Ireland because that's something they focused a lot on. And why have kilns when they can just trade whatever they have in terms of England, and just allow England just to have their trade with pottery? So the pottery is coming from England, but it's showing how there's a lot of connection with these areas. And I think one thing that was frustrating me was, why would you trade in Ireland and just miss Wales completely? It was just crazy. So hopefully I'll get to show you where, in terms of trade, hopefully I won't go too much on the trade heavy part because I do want to save some of that for another lecture as well. But I just want to look at Viking Wexford. This is a reconstruction that has been created nearby. And it was really nice to see this because for me, I'm very visual. I need pictures, I need reconstructions, I need maps, because you can write everything for me, and I'll take it in, but I'll never truly understand it until I get a look at it. And a lot of what we're looking at today is just a lot of visual things. Like I said, I'm a very tactile person. If I go somewhere, I like to touch the walls. I probably look a little bit crazy because I'm touching the walls and I'm closing my eyes and I'm imagining things. There's a book that I have called a Time Traveler's Guide to the Medieval World, and that's a really nice, just easy to read book. Because it just shows you how everything would have looked and how people would have felt, and just really puts you into that time period. So looking at reconstructions allows me to do that further. And this is something that has shown a lot of Viking presence in Wexford. It's very extensive, and the archaeological excavations that they had in Oyster Lane in the 1970s and Bride Street in the 1980s showed how there was a lot of Viking influence here, and it was very rich, the archaeology and the history. And I think Ireland's done a very good job with pinpointing things, but what I've noticed is that online on Google is harder to find things. So it's been a lot of Google Scholar, a lot of academic articles that have come into play here, and that's okay. It just frustrates me sometimes because I think it misses out quite a few people who might not be in the academic community that just want to read up about this. So that's my only criticism of anything like that, but that's just me. Anyway, they found 16 houses in the area in terms of excavations, and I think that was what people were really interested in, because they're starting to see that there was a Viking community here, and the Vikings saw potential in this area. There was a lot of raids going on in the early medieval period from the 7th century to the 9th, but it seemed like the Vikings had a very nice peaceful settlement then for themselves after all that was done. And they thought the mouth of the Wexford harbour was a perfect place, and it is a perfect place. Again, it's very good for people to come in and trade, and it's also good for them to just settle up their communities and just let it grow and expand. There's a lot of monasteries here, and we will look at a monastery from the 7th century, St. Aidan, which had seen a raid, has seen a lot of conflict and a lot of burning down and a lot of damage, but the walls are still standing there, not fully, but still standing there. And it really interested me because we will soon see that there was a round tower that's connected to the church, and it just kind of made me think a little bit of the lecture that we had with Karl in the terms of the round towers. But this reconstruction, I think, just allows us to step back in time and just have a look at what it was like in the mid-9th century, because the Viking populations here were established as permanent bases in this area and in other areas of Ireland, especially Dublin. And in 888 AD, there was Old Irish texts that record the Irish defeating the Norse of Wexford and Waterford, which is nearby. And the Viking fleet was recorded by 912 AD. So I think this just shows that this is a permanent and significant base as well, because there's a lot of conflict of this area. The Irish want it and the Vikings want it. It's because this is very significant in terms of communication with other people, and just allows them to just expand and grow. And from what I've read in some archaeological excavations, is that some people have argued that this is a very early power centre. So what we see with Dinas Powys and Tintagel, it seems like it was a little bit set up like that, which is quite interesting, but they're still trying to find more concrete evidence for that. I know there has been a lot of excavations happening. There's one currently happening in Wexford as well. In one of the monasteries, they're looking at the burials, because there's a multi-period burial, and they have a archaeologist there as well who is really interested in this. And I had a look online. Obviously, they had excavations right at the beginning of the pandemic, but I know they've been postponed and they're back up again. And I think that's one thing I'm liking at the moment, is that I'm seeing more and more people going out and excavating. Like I said about Cardiff University, they had their first excavation, and it must have been amazing for them, because it's so hard. It's over a year now of this pandemic, and a lot of the groups haven't been able to show their skills and show off what they love doing, and now they're allowed to do that. So it brings a smile, it also brings a tear to my eye, just to see this beautiful idea of having more excavations and having a look and getting more involved. And I think the beauty of the pandemic has made people look into things more. But this Viking area, it had 25 acres, so this was larger than Waterford, which was 18 acres, and it was nearly half of that of Dublin, who had 50 acres. So it's in the middle of how big this was, but this developed, and they saw this as a service town, where they were seeing a lot of trade, like I said, and a lot of connection with other people. And it was 1283, the arrival of the Anglo-Normans, where you start to see a lot of rent, services and customs of Ausman, which was recorded in the south of the county. So the Norse hinterland was recorded in 1307 as well. So it seems like they had a very strong influence on the Irish as well. And I think that is one thing that we need to take into account, is when we have migration in trade, there's obviously going to be an effect in terms of influence of identity. And to me, that is one focus as well, is how we can all affect each other, indirectly or directly, through trade and just migration. And it builds up who we are today. And this has a lot of Viking hordes as well to be here, in terms of the county of Blackcastle here as well nearby. And I think this is something that is quite fresh to look at, to see a Viking settlement reconstructed by the National Heritage Park. And these, even though they're not exactly in Wexford, at the heart of Wexford, it shows what they would have looked like in Wexford town. And they're saying here that it was accurately recreated, because they were informed by the archaeological excavation. And the Norse influence was the influence of the name Wexford as well. This is the reason why we have this name. And so they're starting to see that, along with the excavations, we're having a lot of documentary evidence that shows the importance of this area for the Vikings. And this excavation that we talk about in Oyster Lane and Bride Street were done by a series of field school students as well. And they were able to just peel back the layers of history, and they were able to decipher this Hiberno-Norse influence and settlement here. And I think it just shows the defences in the harbour as well. It's very strong, and I think they understood that to be in this amazing area of Wexford, we need to embrace people coming over and trading with us, but we also need to be very wary, and so there was very strong defences there as well. And they were actively used in 1169 as well, so you're seeing this Viking influence still carrying on into the later medieval period. And I think that's what makes it even more magical, is because people just think of Vikings, and when I used to think of Vikings, I don't know, I just used to think of the Vikings and Lindisfarne. I never really think of Ireland, and to see Ireland having a rich archaeological evidence of Vikings just makes my heart skip a beat. It really does make me happy. So we'll go in further now in terms of the trade that we have going on here. And I've shown this image before, but it is a very nice image. Again, it's just very visual for me. This is the later trade route of the Vikings. So they're going from Dublin to Wexford, to Swansea to Bristol. That's the focus of that discussion. Obviously, I'll be focusing on lots of other areas in South Wales. But it used to be just to Dublin to Chester, which is still a trade route in this time, but they're able to hit more spots here as well. And I think what drew the Vikings is how Ireland and Wales had this rich agriculture, this rich farmland, where people are actually taking that in as part of their identity. And you see that with Hywel Dda. A lot of laws are created in terms of trade, of animals and agriculture, and even just people's rights. So it's something that Wales and Ireland both share, this love for their agriculture and their livestock. And there's something that I thought was quite interesting to read. This was from the Journal of the Royal Society of Antiquarians in Ireland. This was Charles Doherty. He was looking at the exchange and trade in the early medieval periods in Ireland. And he said that trade in this period was almost like a way of making alliances, but also sending out a message. Political friendships are made here as well. He said that trade is different to gift giving because it ensures an access to a market. But he argued something that was quite interesting. He said that in terms of politics, if a king was able to give something to another king that was valuable to him, it was saying, yes, I want to create a political alliance with you. However, if I give this to you, I'm superior to you, and if you accept this, you're submissive to me. So I think there's a lot going on in terms of trade. It's not just as simple as what we think about now. But I think with Ireland, especially in terms of Dublin, and we do see some of evidence of this in Wexford, is that there's a lot of trade in terms of food. So a food market here, and it makes sense because we're seeing a lot of grains and farm animals, cheese, milk, all being traded, and that's something that's important to them. And you do see that in Wales as well. And you need ports for trade, and Dublin and Wexford are perfect ports to focus on, and they're two areas that I have focused on in my dissertation, but obviously Wexford's the focus of today. And from the 8th century to the 9th century, so a century after the Vikings had come over and raided and they settled, you're seeing this economic growth in Ireland. And it's almost like they have this growth in local markets as well. They have this authority that have started. And when you look at the importance of authority, it provides this stability, not just politically, but in terms of trade. So when you, there's a book that I've read called Medieval Wales by David Stevenson, and he talks about how Wales needed that political stability to grow economically. And you see this boom as soon as this happens in the later medieval period for Wales. However, the archaeology doesn't seem to match up to me in terms of that as well. So I think there's something going on in the early medieval period that people aren't really getting. But again, it's that missing piece of the puzzle I'm just trying to find out further. Archaeologia Cambrensis has been an angel throughout all of this. But you have a strong Norse effect on Irish institutions. A lot of these changes weren't written down, but they were mostly social aspects. They brought coinage to Ireland in the 9th century. And one thing about the Vikings that I loved is that they also helped bring urbanism and this international trade. You see that after the Vikings had left, Ireland was really benefiting from trade in terms of France. So it's not just hand green pottery from Bristol and things from South Wales in terms of food, but you're seeing a lot of pottery in terms of France and other areas as well, which is again, it's just beautiful to see this connection, because it's proven what I'm believing is right. But there's also a suggestion in St Patrick's Confessio of exports of dogs from Ireland, and wine ships must have brought essential commodity to numerous monasteries. So that's something that I've noticed in terms of trade with the continent and even the Mediterranean, is that for me it would contain wine, and seeing them in areas that have a strong religious standpoint here, which is beautiful. It's even more beautiful because you're just able to bring religion into this, and how some ports with strong religious presence has seen a lot of trade from not just Britain, just from other places. And the Vikings even saw connections with the Isle of Wight and the north of Wales, and even Scotland as well. So Ireland is in a very good place, I think. It's smack bang in the middle to connect with a lot of places in Britain. And there's a lot of problems in terms of trade that we know about. There's obviously going to be a lot of connections in terms of plagues. Justinian plague as well brought a lot of complications, which is seen in documents, which had affected the law codes and the customs and the traditions. But this was mostly social anyway. But you see, from the 900s to the 1200s, this is when Ireland just boomed completely in terms of the trade. They're really seeing this wealth of the land, the people, of the animals. They're a farming society. There's a lot of water mills and ploughing. This is a sign of wealth. They're prospering, they're developing. And the objects that they would have had for exchange would have been animals, farm products, cereals. Beer was noted by this article, and even salt and clothing. Wool was something that was very important to Ireland, just like it was in Wales. There was even prestige objects as well, in terms of swords, horses, female slings, drinking horns, brooches, and all these luxuries. But from the overseas, you're seeing wine coming in. And this is a cattle-dominated society, so it brought society together to work together to look after their livestock and their farms, because this is what's given them the wealth. And there's a lot of evidence in terms of the early medieval period, and we see this with a lot of areas such as Dinas Powys as well, that there's trade with Spain after the Romans. Wine is an important part of trade, and trade is important for imports. So this was something that was vital for people's livelihood, and a lot of pottery fragments near the Irish Sea from the late 4th to the 7th century had shown a lot of rich trade going on here, and a lot of evidence is pointing to wine is essential, like I said, to Christianity, because it's the celebration of Mass. And they even found a lot of pottery in Wexford for masses and for altars as well. So they even found African red slipware from the 6th century in terms of bowls and dishes as well. They're really showing off here, because their wealth must be amazing. And I think this is why there needs to be more focus, because people talk about Waterford, they talk about Dublin, but Wexford is not that much discussed, but it is at the same time as just making those links. That's what I've noticed with a lot of the archaeology. No one has sat down and made the links, which is it makes me scream. But one thing that Claire McCutcheon and Rosanne Meenan discusses is how Ireland saw no need for kilns in Ireland, and it's the same with Wales. They just traded with Bristol, for example, or any other part of England or anywhere else in Europe, is the most practical way of getting pottery, because they can focus on their own type of trade, which everyone is benefiting from, and they can have this amazing pottery in return, which makes sense. But then people start having this discussion of trade with Ireland and Wales in terms of France and Spain. Did it directly come from them or indirectly? And I'm sat on the fence at the moment until I get more evidence. One part of me is saying yes, they're directly trading, but the other part of me is saying that no, they're indirectly trading. They're getting it from places like Bristol or Tintagel. So it's quite interesting. But when you look at E.A. Lewis, she had written in the Transactions of the Royal Historical Society. She's looking at the development of trade and commerce in Wales. She talks about Ireland being a very important part of Wales because they're allowing them to have this economic stability in terms of their trade. And also having Ireland there has allowed people to go past Wales and trade with them as well. But that's one thing that amazes me, is that people always talk about trade routes and always miss out Wales, and it just doesn't make sense to me because as we know from a lot of literature such as Gwynfor Evans that I talk about, he talks about even before the medieval period this strong friendship between Ireland and Wales, and why wouldn't they trade with each other or have their backs in some sort of way, even if they were just part of the same trade route. And something that really was interesting to read, which was by someone called W. Richardson in Archaeologia Cambrensis. He talks about this idea of creating maps in the medieval period, and he said that you see a lot of maritime traders making their own maps because they know where they're going, and the problem is that the names they're coming from personal experience, from other seamen, from other people who live in the areas they come to. But it shows that Ireland and Wales have had a strong connection, and they've both allowed these maritime traders to know about an area nearby that might be a help in terms of anything else that they might need. So that's been very interesting as well. And Karl-James Barton, he had an excavation in Bristol where he found a kiln in Ham Green, and they saw this very distinctive pottery. And you see this all throughout South Wales and in Wexford and Dublin. In fact, in Wexford, there's a lot of this type of pottery. And Karl-James Barton's article, it's really interesting, but if pottery bores you, it might go a little bit too much into how pottery is made and what it looks like. But this is something that's part of my dissertation and what I'm focusing on. So it'd be nice to see if I can answer some more questions that I'm having, but it seems like every time that I answer questions, more questions come out of it. So at the moment, I'm just feeling like I'm screaming at the laptop on the daily. And one thing that I thought was quite interesting to just bring into trade, which has been noted by Wendy Childs, is that this image here, the illustration states this idea of an inauguration of a king, and she focused on the cauldron pot here, and how the poem that's nearby this image that she's recreated talks about having English trade for this pot, because they're more focused on their cattle and how important that is for the inauguration and all the other things, which shows that Ireland's using England and their pottery as a way of them developing their identity further. They can focus on their traditions, they can focus on their livestock, and they can focus on what makes them Irish in terms of their traditions. But in the Wexford city centre, about 78 lath-turned vessels ranging from wide mouth to deep bowls and shallow dishes and platters turned up in excavations, which is solidifying this idea that they had this inauguration of killing an animal and killing parts of it and cooking it, and then the king being put into this barrel and they having this almost like a ritual in a way. So it's something that's very symbolic to them, and I think that's one thing that I find interesting about Ireland, is that I think the reason why they had grown a lot in terms of their trade and their economy is because they have a strong political stability here that has been enforced into their social aspects and something that they feel very close to. So it's very interesting, this this article, and it leads me down so many rabbit holes, and I just love it a bit, especially looking at Ireland. And we even got to this image here. So after the Vikings, we see Robert Fitzstephen and Diarmid Murroch. Thank you, Anne. They're looking over this Hiberno Norse town of Wexford before capturing it in 1169, and it's a very nice image for me because again it just makes it more visual. You see all the little ships there, you've got long boats in the corner, you've got other ships as well, a lot of horses, you even see people in terms of, if I can get it up, again, this dramatic person on the horse and the horse going upwards, that typical medieval drawing really there. But you're seeing a lot of people in terms of where they would have lived, and it's all based in this area here because the coast is important. And I think the coast is important for lots of things in terms of identity, religion, trade. It allows you to connect to more people, and I think it just showed how important Wexford was, the fact that they're willing to take on this little settlement and try and take it over for themselves. It had a lot of importance in terms of politics and connections with other civilizations. And then we get to this Augustinian Abbey here, which I don't know if you've noticed, for this round tower sort of structure connected to the building. And this is thought to be founded in the 7th century, and it was burnt down in Viking raids and rebuilt then in the later medieval period. But this roundhouse feature seems to be a very distinctive feature for Ireland. And to me, it could have been an area for monks to just, like I've said this with the round towers, an area for the monks to escape to. And write manuscripts. Now that would make more sense, that a lot of medieval theology is seeing things in a very symbolic way, and to me this would be symbolic of being closer to God. And so you can write these manuscripts because you're closer to God, and you might have him speaking to you more clearly. And this has been something that's subject to a lot of archaeological investigations as well. It fallen, like I said, during the Viking raids in 930 AD, and it was left destroyed. And the 10th century, it was rebuilt by King Murroch. And this part of this church is still surviving today, and is absolutely beautiful, just looking at all different aspects of it, even though it's not fully there. And especially with Ireland, they have these beautiful pictures that show the landscape off. It just makes me insanely jealous that I just want to go there then myself. But this is also known as St Mary's Abbey. There's a lot of names that come to this as well. Some of them call it St Eden as well, because in the 7th century, that was where the first monastery was founded. And this has been subject for archaeological excavations as we're going on. And especially in terms of investigations, like I said, there was an archaeologist that wants to focus on this here and look at any multi-period burials that are nearby. And I think this, like I said, this tower structure really struck me as something important because it is still standing, it's very strong. It seems like the Irish have a very good sense of stonework and a good sense of architecture to keep these buildings going, and it must have been something amazing to look at when you first came here for the Vikings, that even though they were possibly thinking of just raiding, you couldn't help but notice this tall tower just in the middle of this greenery and just think, wow. And even just little aspects of the windows, and again, it's just beautiful. And I think just to look at it, to even excavate there, I think you must be a lucky duck, and you can pay a lot of money for it, but I don't have £4,000 to spare, because they are teaching you as you go along as well. But this is seen as something that was important. The king wanted to rebuild this because it was part of Irish identity. He wanted to further solidify that, and it brought his popularity up as well. And then we get to the cathedral. Apologies for the top photo, it's not the best. It looked the best when I put it there. But again, looks can be deceiving, especially in terms of online things. But the cathedral was built in the beginning of the 13th century by St. John, Bishop of Ferns, between, I think, about 1223 to 1243. And the principal remains consist of fragments of the two side walls of the chancel of the 13th century cathedral, and it had been later built on as well. But these windows are very unusual because they're very closely set rather than spaced out. And I think that that's quite interesting as well to note, because it seems like that there's a lot of distinctive architecture going on here, and there's a way of Ireland having their mark and to be remembered as well. And there's they said that there's a tomb that features St. John, the bishop as well, wearing a mitre and holding a staff as well that's there, and his head resting on a cushion. And there's a dog placed at the bottom of his feet as well. So this idea of companionship, which it makes it even more lovely to think about. I know online you can have a little play around with a 3D reconstruction of that tomb and have a look around it. But I think it shows how important he was to create this cathedral. Sadly, this cathedral has been a victim of vandalism in recent years, and it's something that they've looked at to keeping alive and just protecting it. And again, it's something that we need to focus on. I don't understand why people do it, because I know Barry Castle has been subject to vandalism, and I just don't understand why people look at an old building and don't think, oh, that's my heritage, or I wonder what it would have looked like around here. They just think, no, I'm just going to spray paint all over and then just kick a few stones out of it. It just does not make sense to me. But this has been a beautiful area, and it's something that they've been thinking of in terms of area of focusing on for further excavations, but we'll have to watch that space as well. And then you see these high crosses. This is one of the examples that I had found, and you can even see you could see St. Mary's Church in the background there as well, just pointing out. So this burial was nearby, and this is the multi-period burials that have been a focus for recent excavations. And to me, I just got, even though it's quite angular and it's different to Pictish stones and St. Docthes, it also was similar to me because of the way the stone was, and just they have a very different influence, a very different purpose for this. But this shows this Celtic influence, I think, in the stonemasonry, and I think it shows how close Celtic nations were in terms of their stonemasonry and their art. Something that Gwynfor Evans really focuses on in his earlier part of the book, because he goes through 2,000 years of history, but he looks at how the Irish became this Celtic lake that allowed Scotland, Cornwall, Wales to all connect with each other in some sort of way, and influence each other and keep their friendship very close. So I felt like that was how we see similar sort of stones about. But there's several of these high crosses, and they're even believing that that this is one of the burials of one of the kings there as well. But again, they haven't really pinpointed that. But I was thinking, in terms of these high crosses, maybe they are signs of a burial of high status individual, and to just let them stick out a little bit more. It's almost like a marker of saying that this person's buried here and they have a very strong relationship with God, and we need to remember that. And they've incorporated their Celtic heritage into it. And this was thought to be of King's Meat MacMurrough, who died in Ferns in 1171. He saw Ferns as his political sort of centre, and that's why he built this. Why does it not work? And that's why it's going the wrong way. and that's why he built St Mary's Abbey, because this was an important place for him. It was almost like the capital, and that's how I view it as well. But they believe that this high cross is a reason a reason to believe that this was one of his burials, and I think that's been the focus of the recent excavations, because they want to prove that, and just instead of just leaving it down to documentary evidence, which can be full of stories or just tales or just Chinese whispers, just sort of having the archaeology to further solidify what has been written, I think it's important. And then we get to Ferns Castle, which again is beautiful. Is thought to be built in the middle of the 12th century as well, and it stood on the site of the present stone castle. So this was because this was a perfect area in terms of trade and politics, and something that really was seen as the heartland of Ireland at one point. And you even see on the top left hand side is the grand chapel of this castle, and it's still there today, and it's just breathtaking just to look at that stonemasonry. I think it just shows the wealth of Ireland as well, because they're focusing on a lot of difficult pieces of art, because I see architecture as art, and if you weren't a wealthy country, you wouldn't be able to figure out these skills either. A part of the castle is gone. It would have been a square castle, which would have had 4 turrets on it, but there's only 2 available. But this place you can still go to, and it's definitely a nice place to look at as well. And these towers were seen as important because it allowed them to have this defence. There would have been a large moat as well around it, which further added to the defence, but it doesn't anymore. But much of the original castle has disappeared, which is a shame. But what we can see is we can understand how defence was important in this area, having grand architecture to show off the city's wealth, but also to keep religion close to his heart. We're seeing a lot of religious sites there. There's even one church that I didn't mention, which is St. Peter's Church, which is nearby, which was in a later period, but it just shows how religion is very important for this area, and it seemed to keep this place going. I think religion is important because it's allowing trade, because they need the wine, and so they're able to trade their stuff as well. But what's amazing about this is that you can see the Ferns tapestry, which is showcased in the pre-Norman history of the town. This is a 1,000-year-old art of embroidery on wool, and it was stitched by the members of the local community. And I think, to me, that just adds to the social aspect. There's a lot of togetherness in Wexford, and I think the kings of this area was able to show that quite well, because not only have we seen this architecture, not only have we seen this trade, not only have we seen customs happening that weren't written down, but they were social aspects. We're seeing them create a tapestry because they felt so involved with this area, and so they felt like they had to have a part of that, and that's just amazing. They do show that tapestry here inside the castle, but I'll show you it in a minute after this. But it was 15 meters long, and it has 25 panels of just beautiful images, and I think it just gives us an insight of what it would have been like. This is not all of the panels. It was a nightmare trying to get hold of everything, in all honesty, and this is part of the recreations that they had of it. But to me, it just shows that for example, the third one I'll get my pen out. So this one here, this family looking out from Wexford onto the sea, is important with the boat in the background. Trade's important to them, and this is what keeps the community together and going. You're also seeing this beautiful castle in the background, and you've got St. Mary's Abbey here, which is showing that there's something that would have been the first thing that would have seen when you came here. You see the king even interacting here with the local people. And we're seeing evidence of, even though he's cut off, this was what was frustrating, because when I googled it, people were making their own ones and they were nothing like it, and it was just frustrating me at one point. But I found this one, but not the 25 panels, which made me sad. You're seeing this water here and the individuals in the background, and it's cut off, but this was an image of someone looking after the livestock with all these beautiful plants everywhere. And they even have one where they're looking at the Vikings in this area. There's something that would have affected them in terms of their settlements as well. And you see them running away from the Vikings, which are coming to attack, and you've got a fire in the background, which would make sense with the archaeology of St. Mary's Abbey as well. And then you see a lot of the Vikings fighting in terms of conquest of here as well. And you even see the monks writing things down in terms of their manuscripts as well. Again, I think that would just fit well with that tall tower they had in St. Mary's Abbey, where they felt closer to God. Again, plants, architecture, herbal remedies, medicine. We're seeing chickens. Chickens would have been an important part of their trade. Is their food, is their livestock. And you even have a high status individual here then, with all this little bits of pottery in the image. To me was suggesting that they've got a strong and healthy, wealthy trade that's going on. And I think one thing that I like about Wexford is that this connection with dogs. So even though they have trade with dogs, even though we have a bishop buried in a tomb with a dog at the bottom of his feet, you see a little dog then in the corner here with his little happy face and his tongue sticking out. It just showed to me that they're closer, and they're all united in a way, and they had a way of showing off their area in much beautiful ways in terms of the architecture, in terms of the religion, the trade, and even art. This is a place that's really thriving. And I think it's important because we're seeing a power centre for Ireland throughout the medieval period. It's allowed trade to thrive, it's allowed the farmers to thrive, the people to thrive, the religion to thrive. And I think it had become a part of Irish identity, which had also indirectly influenced Wales through migration and trades as well. And Wexford was not just a place of worship, but this was a place of development in terms of trade and commerce, but also in terms of their art and their social aspects. We're seeing great skill in terms of needlework, stonework, architecture that has been highlighted, that is seen as a place for trade and conquest and raids and connection with other communities. The Irish Sea is a part of communication with the outer world for Ireland, and so Wexford was just a perfect place to settle down to. Like I said, the exports are similar to Wales: wool, timber, cereals, grains, livestock, even beer being mentioned. And I think it just shows how wealthy they are, because they're providing more than one thing, and they're showing off in a way. Even the archaeology is sort of showing off with a very smug grin, and it just makes me smile to look at all this, because to me it's given me a new aspect in terms of Wexford, and the reason why there needs to be more discussion in terms of it as well. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll ask questions if it lets me to stop share. Oh, hurrah, it has. Anne, any questions or anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I just wanted to say I've actually stayed the night in Wexford about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd been to Southern Ireland, and I was fascinated. It was very lively. You know, it was a strange town, but when we went to the docks, you know, to the harbour, it was even stranger, because it was a very shallow, apparently it's very shallow, Wexford, and it's quite treacherous, really. You've got to have, and I'm wondering, you know, whether that was a reason why the Irish Sea, because part of the Irish Sea is very shallow as well. You know, there's a sort of a bridge, isn't there, between and you could even stand up in it, you know. you know, you can stand up in the Irish Sea. Well, I've only had experience of Northern Irish Sea, which was horrible. It was like, you know, really rough, and I thought it was quite deep, you know. From Liverpool to Belfast is a really rough ride. But going from Pembroke to Rosslare, it was like a mill pond, you know.
Oh wow.
Like a bit mill pond. I'm sure it's probably rough at times, you know, and Peter will be able to tell us about that.
Yeah,
But,
definitely.
yeah, I think that the shallowness had a lot to do with why the Vikings came down the Irish Sea, down the east side of Ireland. You know, because of the sort of boats they used. And then we started using those big boats. I suppose that's when they came a cropper, you know. In fact,
one thing I forgot to mention as well is that in the excavations of the Viking area, they did find, and it just adds to my whole idea of medieval childhood really, is that they found a little tiny toy longboat that was just still intact, which was amazing. But yeah, it seems like the maritime trade and even just the ships that came was something that they've seen on a daily, and something that they felt something they felt close to, so much so that children had their little toy boats. Whereas when you see in central England, you see the knight on the horse. So it's very different in terms of toys as well, and maybe different ways of going into their childhood. So in terms of training to be a knight in England, but in Wexford they were training them to go off into the sea and trade and communicate with other people, because that was part of their identity and their path to the future. Thank you, Anne.
Okay.
Peter, anything you'd like to ask or add?
Well, first of all, just inland from Wexford, there is Carrick upon Suir. Now, Carrick upon Suir uses the Carrick Bend and knot as its town symbol. And it's also associated with Falmouth, where you have the Carrick Roads, and that's part of the Celtic knotwork.
Yeah.
But the Vikings have a bad name.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were half as bad as we tend to make out.
Definitely, I agree.
Because in most places, they mixed with the local populace and settled and traded. And they looked at Christianity in the beginning, not as a religion, but as a way of talking peacefully with the people of the local area.
Yeah.
So that's how they used. They weren't necessarily believing in the religion. They simply used it as a way of communication.
Yeah.
And I say places like that. Well, we know in Wales they were regular visitors, and they regularly settled, because Swansea is actually a Viking name.
Yeah.
And when you come into, like I said, you come into Milford, there's various names, and the name of a town, Abbertson, that's named after a Viking leader.
Yeah.
So they settled in the area as well. So their name of being raiding and marauding all the time, I think, is a misnomer.
Yeah.
More often than not, they preferred to react peacefully with the local populace. If they met resistance and they were fought against, then yes, no, they were really, really fierce fighters. But on the whole, they preferred peaceful settlement.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that people don't realise, Peter, is that especially in terms of attack, they will give as good as they get. They're not just going to sit there and just let it happen. But I do think in terms of York as well, we see how family orientated they are and very domesticated. So I think there's more to Vikings than what we know, especially in terms of Ireland. And
they were very community orientated. They had what was known as the Speaker's Stone.
Yeah.
And they would have what was known as the Thing. The Vikings would meet at the Thing when they would be speaking and talking about the various problems of the area. And the man who held the Speaker's Stone, he was the man who was actually speaking at the time, but then the stone was passed to someone else who wanted to speak.
Yeah, no, I agree. You've hit the nail on the head there, Peter. You always do every lecture. So
Sorry.
thank you. No, it's all right. Thank you so much. I always take notes when you say things as well. So thank you. Richard, anything that you'd like to ask or add? Richard, you're on mute.
Not really interesting. Nothing really I can think of adding, you know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, that's it. No, for me.
It's all right. Pat?
Oh, I was interested in those high crosses. Like that was the bottom of a high cross that you showed us.
Yeah.
The top bit had been off, and and the design that was on it, it was like triangles, making a square to try, and then with all the design in it. I've seen that before somewhere. It's not exactly like the knots, but it's a little different. Anyhow.
Yeah, to me, if it seems more closely associated with Scotland, because you see a lot of angular knots.
Designs,
yeah. So maybe that's their friendship and relationship with Scotland as well coming through as well. Thank you, and thank you everyone. I think that's everyone now. So thank you, and I'll see some of you tomorrow, and I'll see some of you next week. So take care, everyone, and look after yourself and be safe.
Okay, so long.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
God bless.
Carol's coming back, is he?